Good morning, one and all. We're going to go ahead and begin our meeting this morning. Thanks, first of all, to everybody who's traveled and all who are here. We have one or two other Oversight Committee members who are going to be here imminently, but we'll go ahead and proceed just in the interest of time because we have a long meeting. So we'll call the meeting to order today at 10:11 in the morning and ask the Secretary to call the roll.
Mr. Angelou appears to be running a little late. Mr. Geisweit?
Here.
Mr. Guerin?
Here.
Mr. Holmes?
Here.
Mr. Montgomery?
Here.
I believe Dr. Mulrow is also running a minute late. Dr. Rice?
Here.
And Dr. Rosenfeld?
Here.
Thank you. And we'll note in the record as folks arrive, just so that we'll have them, the minutes reflect that they are indeed here as they arrive. Members, the draft minutes for the two most recent Oversight Committee meetings are in your packet. Are there any corrections of the minutes that circulated? Seeing none, we'll take a motion to approve the minutes from February 18th and also April 20th Oversight Committee meetings. There's a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So our next agenda item is public comment. We always appreciate and respect public comment. We are unaware of any requests for public comment. Mr. CEO, is there any requests? Okay, so we'll move right along. Thank you. Chair recognizes Mr. Roberts for the Chief Executive Officer's report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'll try and talk slow. First of all, I'd like to start out by thanking the coordinating board for graciously allowing us to use these fine facilities. It's my hope that our next meetings, and I think our next one will be in August, that we can move back to the extension, but I'll have to work with a senator or a legislator to get that firmed up, but I'm optimistic that we'll be able to go back to meeting in the extension. I guess that's a natural segue to a legislative update. I'm presuming we won't have a special session going on then, but let me give you just a quick rundown of where we are on our important bills. The most important being the state budget. As it stands now, there are no issues between the two bills other than a minor difference in a rider related to our contract approval that is common to a lot of agencies. So it's going to be a decision made for state agencies as a whole and not really focused on CPRIT. So I'm thinking that we're in very good position right now with respect to the budget. They are, I think, almost as I speak, discussing the tax bill. I think their intent is to resolve the differences in the tax bill, which will allow them to quickly finish up the state budget, but they are now rapidly running out of time. It requires considerable staff work by the Legislative Budget Board to prepare the final document, which has to lay out a certain number of hours before it can be heard. So I expect that bill to be heard no sooner than Monday. It could be Monday or Tuesday, but since I'm not talking to the budget conferees, I may be way off, so don't hold me to that. The other big bill that we've been watching, Senate Bill 197 by Senator Schwertner, has come out of House committee and is currently sitting in calendars waiting to go to the floor of the House. And I do expect that bill to pass as it's been modified. My guess is that the Senate will concur with the few House changes that took place with it, but that is the bill that requires us to develop a plan for self-sufficiency beyond our sunset date of fiscal 2021. House Bill 1218 by Representative Zerwas is an HPV plan, developing a statewide plan to reduce the effects of HPV. It has passed the House, gone over to the Senate, where it has been referred to the Health and Human Services Committee. I don't know if it's going to move. As of this morning, a hearing has not been set for it, but that can change here. May have already happened. House Bill 1952 by Representative Springer is the bill that ended the product development program. It has been left pending in House committee, so it is presumed to not have any life left, but as legislative observers are keenly aware, bills that seem to not have any life left often get attached to active bills, provided they're germane, so we will continue to watch that. House Bill 4062 by Representative Coleman is the bill that would increase prevention funding from the current up to 10% to up to 20%. Has also passed the House, and it has been referred to Senate Finance Committee. And again, like the other bill, has not been set for a hearing, so we will keep our eyes open on that. Other bills of interest to us, House Bill 6 by Representative Otto is the funds consolidation bill. We requested at the beginning of the session for our new interest in sinking fund that was created last session be included in the funds consolidation bill. If it isn't, as it wasn't this current biennium, all of our product development revenue goes to the General Revenue Fund and is used for all other state services as opposed to retirement of our debt. So we will see how that progresses. That bill is currently passed the House and is sitting in Senate Finance. And it's very common that what is happening right now is they're waiting until the very end to see all of the other legislation that's gone through, and then the two chairs, Representative Otto and Senator Nelson, will get together and decide which bills will be included in funds consolidation. And finally, Senate Bill 20, the big contract reform bill, passed out of the House yesterday and has gone over to the Senate with some changes. My guess, the Senate could concur on those changes or not concur, and it could go to a quick conference committee, but that bill will pass. And it is going to have a significant impact on all state agencies' contracting processes that we're just all going to have to deal with one way or another. Moving away from the legislative update, I've got a presentation coming up in the first week of June that I'll be going to with Tom, Dr. Goodman, down in Houston on, it's called Redefining Early Stage Investments, and it's a sizable attendance. The meeting is hosted by Life Science Nation and Johnson & Johnson Labs. It's being held at the new Texas Medical Center incubator that is partially run or housed by Johnson & Johnson. And I am going to be on a panel discussing oncology investors and what we're looking for. And I really jumped at this opportunity because now that we have our new contract terms, revenue sharing terms in place, we will have been out of this legislative session. I think it's a real opportunity to promote our product development program and the kind of opportunities that we present. So I'm really looking forward to that. The next is you've had an update distributed to you for the grant fund awards, grant funds that are available to be awarded. The document that's in your book has been replaced, and based on, at this time, assuming that you adopt the recommendations brought to you today and looking forward to what we expect that we know we've got coming to the August meeting, we should have right at $8.2 million available. That said, We do know that there are numerous recruitment grants. Margaret told me a few minutes ago, and I forgot, I want to say it's around 9. And we will be eyeballing those to see which ones we can fit in under that $8.2 million cap. But it does indicate the need to have the special meeting in September so that we can take care of those very important time-sensitive recruitments in September so that we prevent losing any of them. And I would like to leave somewhere in the neighborhood of $2.5 million on the table, just in case something unforeseen happens over the summer. I think it's a safe cushion, similar to what we lapsed 2 years ago. That money, thanks to a rider I expect to be approved in the state budget, will be made available next fiscal year, so we don't lose access to that money. So I'd like to have a little bit of a cushion. I've got several staff announcements to make. We are getting close to our 32 positions. Since we met last, we have hired a new grant accountant. Julian Perez is here. Julian will be reporting to Heidi in the business operations. We have moved Oralia Huggins around. You've met Oralia before, but she is a new grant compliance specialist, and she will be on the team of our new Chief Compliance Officer, who I'm very happy to say is in the room here today, Vince Burgess. We're really excited to have Vince. You will be working very closely with him in the months and hopefully years ahead. He comes to us by way of California. Former Governor Perry would be very proud of me for bringing another Californian over to the great state of Texas. But Vince is leaving a position as Administrator of Compliance, Quality, and Outcomes at the Solano County Health and Social Services Department. Quite a mouthful. But California operates their health and human services programs, including Medicaid, quite differently than we do. But Vince comes to us with a good background in health and human services compliance programs. He's been running a firm compliance program, so he's got hands-on operations experience with it, is coming on at a time where he can help mold the compliance program with our new contractor that we've fully engaged, and then with the nearly complete staff of grant compliance specialists. So I'm really expecting us to have the very strong compliance program that I promised you folks 2 years ago that we would have. In addition to that, we have moved 2 people that have been with us for quite some time, but they were contract employees. They've now been brought on as full-time employees. We've got Jim Hurlbut over here, our system administrator, and I think back there, Jason Romero is also with us, who is a programmer that works with Terry Simeon. So we're getting very close. We have one position that is being screened right now, and another one is reposted. So we're about there. Even though they are not staff personnel, we do have a couple of changes with the Oversight Committee. Governor Abbott has appointed Dee Margot of El Paso for a term that expires September 1st, 2021. Tomorrow, the Nominations Committee of the Senate will hear him As with Mr. Geistwhite, Mr. Angelos, and Dr. Rice, they've been instructed that they do not need to appear in front of the nominations committee, which signals blue skies or clear sailing for that nomination. I expect that nomination to be approved probably early next week with the Senate. Mr. Margot, as I said, is from El Paso, so he helps us with our board geographic diversity. He's a businessman, brokerage firm experience. He has been a state rep from 2010 to 2012. He's very active in the El Paso Chamber of Commerce. He's got Vanderbilt ties. We seem to have a lot of people around the Texas legislature these days with Vanderbilt ties, the governor included, and was a scholarship football player. So he and Mr. Guerin can square off someday and see who's the better who's the better lineman there. However, with that good news is a little bit of sad news, and that is this is Mr. Geistwhite's last meeting as an Oversight Committee member. He remains an Oversight Committee member until the second that the Nominations Committee confirms Mr. Margot. And on behalf of the staff, I'd like to just say a very brief comment. We all have had a lot to do in the last 2 years, so some of the timing of this gets to be forgotten. But along with Mr. Angelou, Mr. Geistwhite was actually appointed before the rest of y'all. They got seniority over every one of you. They were appointed on March 1st, 2013, right after the last formal meeting of the previous Oversight Committee, which never met again. And so they never had the joy of sitting on an actual Oversight Committee meeting, but they worked with us. We were in constant communication with them, and Mr. Geistwhite in particular brought a very strong calming influence to us at a time that we really needed it. And as we all know, a very, very dry sense of humor. So one former state rep is being replaced by another former state rep. I see a trend here. With that, I think, Mr. Chairman, I think you might have had a comment you wanted to make.
Sure. Joe, Jerry, I guess as the chairman, I was going to take a moment to tell you what a great pleasure it's been to work with you these last years, and we appreciate your work and your diligence, of course, and we're looking forward to coming and visiting you in Mason, and we have a small token of appreciation for you, which is a card and a small gift. It's inscribed with your name on it. So thank you.
Appreciate that. Members, thank you all. You guys are still about God's work, and I think if there's any governmental body that crosses all racial lines and poverty lines and anything else, everybody's got someone that's close to them that has cancer. And you're spreading God's work among a population that really needs the activities of this committee, and I just appreciate so much having been able to serve with you for a while. I'm starting an organization as soon as I leave here for those legislators who are not in full support of CPRIT. I noticed there are not very many of them that are that way, and most of the legislature's been supportive, but I've noticed 3 or 4 of them that sort of seem to resent what we're doing here, and so I'm starting an organization called Friends of Cancer, which I'm going to invite these people to join afterwards. Thank you all very much for everything.
We're going to miss you, Jerry.
Yes, Jerry, indeed.
Right.
And we appreciate that support during and after your service.
All right.
Thank you, Jerry. Proceeding, we're going to take the next item out of order, which is to go into closed session, and I'm asked to read that pursuant to Texas Government Code 551 and Texas Health and Safety Code 102.2631, we're going to just go into closed session to discuss an ongoing compliance investigation. The committee will now move to the anteroom and convene in closed session, and we'll ask the Oversight Committee to be joined by staff, Mr. Roberts, Dr. Kripke, and Kristen Doyle. And so the time is 10:30. We'll go into closed session now and be back in a little bit. Chair recognizes Dr. Garcia to present the prevention program report. It's behind tab 3 in your packet. Dr. Garcia will also introduce the Program Integration Committee's grant award recommendations for prevention grant awards. Dr. Garcia, good morning.
Good morning. I'm on. Yes. Okay, so under tab 3, you have a very brief prevention report. And I'm really not going to read through that. I'm going to focus on the grant recommendations for fiscal year 15 Cycle 2. So we issued 4 RFAs this cycle, 2 of which are new. The first one is our evidence-based prevention services RFA. This one will support the continuum of prevention services, whether they be primary prevention, things such as tobacco cessation, vaccinations, secondary, our screening projects, or survivorship services. The second one, Colorectal Cancer Prevention Coalition, is a new RFA, and it's soliciting projects that deliver colorectal cancer screening in a comprehensive way through a coalition of providers that can then cover a region of the state. The competitive continuation expansion grants are for projects that want to continue or expand projects that we are previously or currently funding and have shown a great deal of success. And then the last RFA that we released this cycle is also new. It is our education RFA, and it really is for projects that deliver public education and outreach in addition to navigating people to the appropriate services. So it doesn't actually cover the service, but just the navigation to the service that is the result of the education program. So we started the process with 37 applications in December. We went through the peer review process, and today we're recommending 11 grants for $20.6 million. This is our Prevention Review Council. We had one new committee chair join us, Dr. Brownson from Washington University. So I'm going to present 3 different slates to you in your other book, your grant recommendation book under Prevention tab. I've got a brief paragraph description for each one of these projects, but I'll just give you some very high-level descriptions of the projects. But if you want to read along, it's the first memo under Prevention in that other book. So for the evidence-based services slate, we received 16 applications. We're recommending 4 of those for $5.7 million. 2 of the projects are really addressing new topics for us, topics we've not covered before in our prevention portfolio. One is for the screening of hepatitis C to prevent liver cancer, and the other is a survivorship project for head and neck cancer survivor services. It'll be providing speech pathology and swallowing exercises for head and neck cancer patients as they go through their radiation treatment. The other 2 on this slate, there's a colorectal cancer screening project in Val Verde County. That's where Del Rio is located. And the last one on this slate provides breast, cervical, and colorectal cancer screening in 4 South Texas counties. And I just want to remind or emphasize that these are not just screening projects. They are comprehensive projects that provide education, outreach, delivery of the service, and navigation to treatment if needed. So I'll go on to the next slate, Colorectal Cancer Prevention Coalition. We had 5 applications that were received in response to this new RFA, and since it was new and it takes quite a bit to form a coalition of providers, we expect that interest in this will grow over time. We did receive 5 applications, and 2 of those are being recommended. One is to the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center and Moncrief, and they're going to be covering 20 counties in Tarrant and then north of Tarrant County with a coalition of different service providers. The next one is to MD Anderson, and they are their coalition is with federally qualified health centers, and they're going to be serving 20 counties going from Harris County out east. So 2 very different geographic areas of the state, and 2 areas that, when we look at the incidence and mortality data, are really in need of these services. So the last slate is our competitive continuation and expansion grants. I've got 3 on this slide, 3 on the next slide. So these are projects that we've funded before, have had really outstanding results, met or exceeded all of their objectives, and they're applying either for continuation or expansion of their projects. We had 10 submitted and 5 are being recommended. The first 3, excuse me, on this slide, the remnants of a cold, sorry, are for breast and cervical cancer screening. Again, first went to UT Southwestern and Moncrief, and they'll be covering counties in Tarrant and north of Tarrant, North Texas, up north from Tarrant County. The second one is Angelo State University, and they'll be covering 21 counties around the San Angelo area. The other one on this slide is the Rose, and they are covering 34 counties in southeast Texas, and their expansion is to add 10 counties. And the last 2 in this slate, there's one to the University Health System in Bexar County for colorectal cancer screening. And the last one on this slide is to the Texas AgriLife Extension Service, and they're covering an amazing 50 counties in frontier and rural areas and border counties. And they're able to do this because of their extension service, where they are in just about every county in the state. This expansion adds 28 counties to their previous project. So those are the 3 slates. There was a cancer prevention, promotion, and navigation to clinical services RFA that we released. There were 6 applications submitted there, and we're not recommending any of those for funding.
Easy for you to say.
I'm still tickling my throat. Just wanted to show you, again, the result of adding these 11 projects. What happens, this is a moving target with, by the time these are awarded and contracted, we will have 16 projects that close. And so we're adding 11 projects. So the result is we're staying at the same percentage with 89% of our counties in the state covered with a service that is targeting them directly. So some closed, some are added. We are, interestingly enough, at the very same percentage. So with that, I will answer any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. Questions for Dr. Garcia?
Chairman, I just wanted to, for the benefit of the whole Oversight Committee, wanted to share briefly some of the discussion we had at the committee level. Two things. One, even though this was RFA that went out before we had our priorities established, that Dr. Garcia went over the committee how these these programs did in most cases align with those priorities. And the second, we had some discussion about county level statistics. For example, one of these grants might cover 20 counties, and at least as relates to clinical services, we are going to explore how we can get additional detail to ensure that the services are equally provided across all 20 counties. For example, if a grantee is representing that it is going to provide the service across all of those counties. So just two issues that we did discuss at some length, and wanted to share that with the Oversight Committee. Thanks.
Just one quick question, Becky. Most of the grants are for about $1 million.
Excuse me?
Most of the grants are for about $1 million.
The evidence-based services, the maximum award is 1.5. The competitive continuation one, most of those are about the same amount. The Coalition for Colorectal Cancer, we left without a funding cap because we weren't sure what size coalition we might get proposed. We wanted them to cover as much of the state as possible. And so one of those is 4.8 million. The other is, excuse me, I don't remember exactly how much the other one.
2.5.
Yes, 2.5.
And my question was, on the, does the grant for 4.8 compared to the grant for 2.5 cover that proportionally more counties?
Not counties per se, but people served. So while the number of counties is about the same, they are proposing to serve a lot more people with the 4.8. And so that's part of their goals and objectives that we will be measuring progress against.
Any other questions? I'll note, members, again, this second book that we have, inside the tabs on that second book are the individual pedigree and attestations and meeting review council reports, just for your information. So we'll proceed, if there's no other questions, with Kristen Doyle, our interim chief compliance officer, with the compliance report for these prevention slates.
Members, I certify that the review process for the applications that have been recommended for the prevention program awards have complied with the applicable statutory and administrative rule requirements. On the portal and now in the proposed grant award booklet, my memo from May 6th, it's located immediately behind the PIC recommendation letter. It describes the process for reviewing the documents for compliance and all of the various stages of the review process. The memo addresses all of the award slates that you'll be considering, so for academic research prevention program and for product development. I note the things that I reviewed and specific issues in the review process. I won't go through that unless an Oversight Committee member would like me to or has any questions.
Hearing none, seeing none, we'll proceed. We'll note, before we go through a series of motions to approve these slates, we'll go over the reported conflicts of interest from the Oversight Committee members so that we can sort of dissect our motion sequence So specifically, Ms. Mitchell reports conflicts with applications submitted by the following institutions: the University of Health System, University of Texas Health Science Center at San Antonio, University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center, University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center, Texas AgriLife Extension Service, Val Verde Regional Medical Center, and Angelo State University. So in accordance with our rules, Ms. Mitchell is recused from discussion or action on these applications. Additionally, Dr. Mulrow reports a conflict with PP 150079 and is recused from discussion or action on this application. The list of applications with reported conflicts has been placed at your desk, and we'll sign these at the end and include them in the minutes as we've done previously. Are there any other reported or unreported declarations of conflicts that the Oversight Committee members need to make at this time? Seeing none, hearing none. So we'll proceed. You have the list of applications, the grant amounts recommended by the PIC for prevention grants. The PIC's recommendations will be approved if 2/3 of the Oversight Committee members vote to approve. Rather than taking them up individually, we'll take them up in slates for the awards. We'll vote in 3 groups. The first 2 groups will be the applications with which Ms. Mitchell and Mulrow, Dr. Mulrow, are in conflict. The third will be the application with no reported conflict. So at this time, we'll take a motion to, we'll entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendations for evidence-based cancer prevention grant awards for applications submitted by the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center and also Val Verde Regional Medical Center. Is there a motion? So, thank you. Is there a second? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. For the record, we'll note that Ms. Mitchell abstained from voting. Next one. Okay, so at this time, we'll entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendations for evidence-based cancer prevention grant awards for the applications submitted by the University of Texas Health Science Center at San Antonio. And now Ms. Mitchell and Dr. Mulrow will both not be involved in the vote. So we're looking for a motion.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So we've had 2/3 of the members present and able to vote. Motion carries. And we'll note for the record that Ms. Mitchell and Dr. Mulrow abstained. So we'll now look for a motion to approve the PIC's recommendations for evidence-based cancer prevention grant awards for the application submitted by MHP and Company Promo Viendo Vitus Solubles. Is there a motion? Is there a second? Let's move quickly. All in favor say aye. All opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. So we'll move to the second slate. We'll entertain a motion for the PIC's recommendation for the Colorectal Cancer Prevention Coalition grant awards submitted by University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center and the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. A second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So we'll note for the record that Ms. Mitchell abstained from voting. And now we'll lastly take the motion, the third slate presented by Dr. Garcia. We'll entertain a motion for the PIC's recommendations for competitive continuation expansion grants for applications submitted by University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center, University Health System, Texas AgriLife Extension Service, and Angelo State University. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And we'll note for the record that Ms. Mitchell abstained from voting. So now we'll lastly entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendation for competitive continuing expansion grant awards for those submitted by the Rose. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So now that we've completed this slate of approvals, we'll ask that there be a motion to delegate contract negotiation authority to the CEO and CPRIT staff and to authorize the Chief Executive Officer to sign contracts on behalf of the Institute. Is there a motion? Thank you. Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
members.
Dr. Garcia.
Thank you.
So we'll move right along to the Scientific Officer Report. Chair recognizes Dr. Kripke to provide the Chief Scientific Officer's report, and Dr. Kripke will introduce the Program Intervention PIC's grant award recommendations for academic research. Good morning, Dr. Kripke.
Good morning again. It is my pleasure to bring you the update on the scientific research program. And we are going to deal with later today the latest round of grant applications, and I'll just tell you a few things about those. These are the grants that were submitted for the second cycle of 2015. There were 159 grant applications received, which doesn't sound like very many until you realize that 42 of the grants were multi-investigator awards, each one of which can have as many as 8 different components. And so it was a very large slate of material grants that were reviewed. And of the high impact, high risk awards, there were 100 of those, and there were 100 because I'll remind you, these are restricted. The number of these is restricted to so many per institution. And so we typically get about 100 of those applications. 16 of those were recommended for funding by the SRC and by the PIC, and that's a 16% success rate, which is actually a little higher than it's been. It's been as low as 10. This is I think the highest number that have been approved. We also offered in this round core facilities awards. There were 17 applications received and reviewed, and of those, 6 were recommended by the review committee, and that's what's coming to you for approval today. And interestingly, there's one of those that's actually in computational biology, so I thought you would be interested to hear that. So that was very good news. And there's another one that's in another unusual area that is trying to help clinicians make decisions about which treatment modality to use based on genetic modifications in people's cancers. So this one is very translational research. Other ones are basic science. There's one core facility award that's making RNA for therapeutic use. You'll remember, I think we've had a number of people working on using small RNA molecules to turn off whole sets of genes. And so there's a core facility application that proposes to do that for lots of people, make synthetic RNA for use in those kinds of investigations. So it's a very good group of core facilities awards. And these are, I think, really come under the heading of building infrastructure for the state of Texas, because these core facilities serve lots of people in a department and an institution, and sometimes they are multi-institutional as well. And so they allow investigators to provide services for a variety of people, and sometimes they do well enough at that the recipients, the users of those facilities, develop additional grant funding and then can help pay to support those facilities long term. So it's a very good investment on CPRIT's part. Now, for the multi-investigator research awards, there were 42 applications that were received, and I'm stunned to tell you that only 2 of them were approved. And this is quite unusual, so the success rate was really very, very low. The good news is that one of them, which was for, I think, close to $10 million, was in liver cancer, which is one of our priority areas, and it's also heavily based on prevention of liver cancers, looking at vaccination from hepatitis B and C. So that one was funded, and there's another one that was funded from Baylor College of Medicine, looking at androgen-resistant prostate cancer. There's a consortium of investigators working on that. So those were the only 2 that were funded. And so we have had some discussions with the review committees about why that was. The Scientific Review Council had a discussion about why that was. And I think there are a number of factors involved here. First of all, I think we did not give people sufficient notice to put together adequate programs. The whole point of having a multi-investigator award is that the sum of the grant should be better than the sum of its parts. So there has to be interaction between people and mechanisms for getting together, and there was not a lot of that in most of the grants, and it wasn't very well described as to how things interrelated. So part of it was, I think, the lack of sufficient time to put these together. I know for big program project grants that go to NIH, sometimes people spend a year or two in preparation for putting those grants in. So I think this was an attempt to get started, and I think that we will have a lot of these coming back for reconsideration in the next round, and that's why we want to make sure that award mechanism gets put into the works for the next round of applications. But anyway, so that brings us, I think, to a total overall of $50 million and change, and the overall success rate for this grant award cycle was about 15%. So we were high on the high impact awards. A lot of the very good response for the core facilities, very good result for the core facilities awards, and a really poor one for the multi-investigator awards. So we've made some changes to the application process, given people more, we're giving them more page limits, and we've made some changes to the, how they will be organized for the reviewers, who gave us some advice about how to do that. And so hopefully we'll have an improved process for the next time around. Are there any questions about, well, let me finish with the other cycles for research grants, and then I'll take questions. We have currently in the works RFAs that have been out. They actually closed today, and we don't know how many will come in by the end of the day, but there are over 500 applications that have been started. And not all of those make it through to completion by 3 o'clock this afternoon, but a significant number of those will. So we're looking at a typical response to individual investigator awards. All of these, except for one mechanism, are individual investigator awards. We are also offering this time training awards because our existing training programs are due to expire. And so to prevent them from having a gap in funding if they intend to continue, we've offered the training awards this time, and we are taking renewals and new submissions. And we did one different thing with those this time. Previously, institutions were only allowed to submit one training award, training application. This time we permitted them to submit a second one if it was in the area of prevention, epidemiology or prevention. And so we do have several applications that are coming in as second applications from an institution in that area. So I'm hoping we'll stimulate some more training in our prevention priority area. With the individual investigator awards, this is the one, we have untargeted awards. We also are repeating the individual investigator awards in cancer prevention, the ones in childhood cancer, and the new one in computational biology. And again, I'm not sure how many of these will make it to completion, but there are 51 applications that have been started, which just astounds me. I didn't know we had that much interest or capability in computational biology. So it remains to be seen whether our reviewers will consider those really computational biology grants or something else. But anyway, this is a very positive response to that mechanism. So they closed today. They will be reviewed in late September, early October. They'll go to peer review, and then they will come to you for the November Oversight Committee meeting. You'll get to see those. So we are now at the point of putting out new RFAs. We'll try to put out new ones in July, and those will be another opportunity for people to apply for the multi-investigator grants. That will be given them a year from the closing the previous opportunity. And so I'm sure we'll get a lot of the ones back. There were a lot of applications that did very well except for one project, or there were criticisms about the lack of integration and so on. So I think many of these are going to be competitive for funding in the next round. And we'll also offer the high impact, high risk grants in that round. And we'll are discussing whether we can also squeak in that round the early translational research awards as well. Okay, that's all I have to say at the moment about research grants. Are there any questions or comments about that part? And then I'll move to recruitment grants.
A couple of questions on unrelated topics. One was on the computational biology. Do we have reviewers that have expertise in that, or are we going to have to buff up and get some reviewers with such expertise?
We have a few. There are some that are on our current peer review panels, but we are recruiting new ones. You will see those at the next meeting. They will have to be approved by the nominations committee in the next round. But we have been combing the universities for people who have that expertise. We are adding them to some of the panels, and some of them we'll just use as ad hoc reviewers. And many of those, if they work out and we continue to have a lot of applications in that area, we may make them permanent members of various panels. So we've also polled all of our panel chairs and told them what kind of titles we're seeing in the applications that have been received so far, to make sure that they're comfortable with that they have sufficient expertise to do those reviews.
That's great. My second question had to do with the training RFAs. Do we have any special provisos put into them to help promote diversity among trainees?
Yes, it's actually a requirement that they provide a plan for how they will address recruitment of underserved populations in their student population. That is a new. It isn't new. It was a strong recommendation. This time it's a requirement, and it's actually based on your comments about that previously. So yes, we did put that in.
Thank you.
Thanks for that report, and again, mindful that these RFAs went out before we had our program priorities. Could you just give some highlights? You mentioned that one is in liver research, but give some highlights of these recommendations as how they stack up against our OC priorities.
Yes, that is in your book.
Mm-hmm. I see that it is. I just
that's a complicated table. It's got a lot of stuff on it, but 15.2 is the round that we are currently discussing and that you will vote on today. And if we go down to the table in the middle of the page, you'll see the priority cancer site, and the 14.1 was the only cycle we had in 2014, and we've had now 2 cycles in this year. And so these are the results in the priority areas. It's a little difficult to make sense of this because the grant cycles are different. The previous grant cycle was all individual investigator awards, and we had targeted awards for childhood cancer and for prevention. And so we got a lot of applications in that area. For core facility awards, generally those are, generic. They serve all kinds of cancers, and so they would not necessarily be in areas, specifically in areas that we're interested in. So it differs from cycle to cycle, depending on what RFA mechanism that we have. But I think you can see that in the priority areas historically, and the left side of the table tells you the number of grants and the percentage, and then the right-hand side of that table tells you the dollar amount and the percentage of dollars in that particular round. We have historically had a number of grants in the lung cancer area. We have done very well. We are doing very well in the 15.2 round for liver cancer for the reason that I told you. We've got $9.8 million in this round, and that's a single grant. That's the Multi-Investigator Research Award. So what we have here is really pretty much a baseline of what we have, with the exception of the targeted awards that we put out in or earlier in 15.1. But this will give you an idea of the baseline of where our grants are, and then you will need to watch over time to see if that changes as we put out more targeted RFAs. And we've now revised the RFAs, including the recruitment RFAs, to indicate what our interests are and to indicate that applications in our priority areas will be well received, favorably received.
Well, just to make sure I understand the chart, it's for 15.2, 22% fell in those targeted areas. You look across the total at the bottom, and 15.1, 18%, and that's the dollar amounts as far as.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank
yes.
you.
Any other questions? Please.
Very quick one. Dr. Kripke, what is the rule on resubmission of grants? In other words, the multi-investigator grants, they get to reapply?
Yes.
Can you just remind me under what circumstances you can submit a grant that was turned down the first time?
You can submit any grant that was turned down the first time. You get a second chance. You can't submit a third time. Right.
Other questions, please, Greg.
Thank you, Margaret. Two quick questions about the core facility. Are the core facilities open to industry, or are they exclusively limited to academics?
They're limited to academic institutions.
You think that's a good thing?
That would be for you to decide.
No. I'm asking for your thoughts and recommendations.
They're really. I would have to think about the implications of doing that. And for example, you might make it open to industry if you charge them more than you charge the university users. I mean, most of these core facilities, I think, are heavily used. And so there's usually a committee, there's required to have a committee to help them prioritize requests for the use of the facility. So I'm not sure how having a company in that mix would work.
Well, I guess I was thinking that one of our goals is to bring companies.
Mm-hmm. Again, I think that we would have to think carefully about the implications of doing that and whether that would be desirable to put the companies in competition with people in the academic institutions. I don't know the answer to that. It may be a great idea. I'm just not sure. I haven't thought about it.
And a second question is, if there's a core facility, is that core facility open to all institutions? For instance, if I'm at UT Southwestern and I got a microscopy core facility, could the guy down the street at UTD use it, or is he banned from using it?
I don't think anybody is banned from using it, and it just depends on the priorities that have been established by the institution as to who has access. The place where that becomes very dicey is when you're talking about a core facility that deals with human tissues, which are when they're in very limited supply. And so we do have core facilities that do biobanking, for example, and so that makes it complicated to send things outside of the institution. But in general, I think people can ask to use it and they get on a priority list, and I don't think there's any prohibition from people using someone else's core facility.
Should we put it as a requirement that all institutions have equal access to CPRIT-supported core institutions?
We could, except that I know that this was attempted in the Texas Medical Center to make core facilities that were supported on core grants available around the, for the whole geographic region. And they ran into a lot of legal issues about material transfer agreements and trying to establish agreements among all the institutions to do that turned out to be very complicated. So it may be possible, but I think, again, we would have to look into that seriously. So you have to decide if you want to make that recommendation, and we can investigate.
Thank you. Other questions? Dr. Kripke, are you continuing now with recruitment conversation?
Yes, I would be happy to do that. First, I was alerted this morning that one of our CPRIT scholars who was recruited to UT Southwestern in 2011, Dr. Joshua Mendel, was just awarded a Howard Hughes Investigator Award, which is a big deal. This is a huge, highly prestigious award that usually is 5 years renewable. And the Howard Hughes, unlike I think almost every other granting agency, supports the individual, not the research project. And so they're rarely and sparingly given. And one of the recipients was recruited through as a CPRIT scholar a couple of years ago. In fact, that department at UT Southwestern has 2 in this round of investigators. So that was
Margaret,
very
a
good
sentence
news.
or two.
Yes.
What's the recipient's research on?
It's on non-coding RNAs, and he discovered that one of the products of the MYC oncogene is a cluster of non-coding RNAs that control cell proliferation and other cellular functions that are important in the development of cancer. So it's an RNA approach, and he's one of the leaders in this area.
I believe that the announcement, or at least the press reports, will be picked up in the clipping distribution that you folks are provided. It was in today's. I saw it myself before I came here this morning.
And just for clarification, that's an award which he stays in place in his current position at UT Southwestern, as I understand.
Yes.
So it's not like he's moving or going anyplace.
No.
All right, please.
No, sir, but I think Mr. Guerin does. We can. You want it warmer or cooler?
Yeah, thank you.
I was going to say cooler.
Yes, thank you.
We're working on it.
You have to apply for training.
Yeah, we're fine down here.
I was going to
Speak for yourself. It's cold in here. Okay, back to business. So we had in the last round of consideration for recruitment applications, 12 applications submitted. One was withdrawn before it went to the SRC for review. The person took another job somewhere else before it was reviewed. So the SRC evaluated 11 applications, and they forwarded 6 of these to the PIC, and before the PIC reviewed them, one also withdrew, either before or after the PIC. I don't remember exactly when. But in any case, you will be asked to look at 5 of these today. So that's what we have on our slate. The book actually says that there are 6, but there are really only 5 that are coming to you today. And within these, there is one Established Investigator Award, and this person is actually he's a computational biologist. He does biological models, yes. Established investigator, and he is doing modeling of biological processes. He is apparently a very, very highly regarded person in this field. He trained in China. This is Hongtu Zhu. He trained in China, and he did a postdoctoral fellowship at Yale University, and then he went to Columbia and trained and was a faculty member at Columbia University for a number of years. And then he went to University of North Carolina, from which he is being recruited to MD Anderson. He has a very strong teaching record in computational biology and mathematical modeling, and they think he'll be very instrumental in helping with the development of training programs. He's the associate editor of about 6 different highly prestigious journals. He organizes conferences on this subject and so on, and he's thought to be the kind of person who will really improve the landscape in this area, and so they are very eager to recruit him. They had requested $6 million, which is the standard that we generally approve for established investigators. The SRC thought that was overreaching for someone who didn't run a laboratory and didn't have to set up a lab and was doing mostly computational computer time and whatever. And so they recommended reducing that award to $4 million, and that's what was approved by the PIC. Okay. Then there are 3 first-time faculty members. The first one on your list, Dr. Liu, is the one who declined, so he is not in the mix. But there are 2 candidates for UT Southwestern, and again, one of them, Dr. Donchik, is does mathematical modeling and image analysis, and he has a very stellar record so far in being able to model neurological pathways and put that together with behavioral data and model brain activity and behavior. So he also does image analysis in cancer and in cells, and so that's what he's being hired to do at UT Southwestern. He's going to be mentored by a previous CPRIT established investigator scholar who is a established investigator in this field, and so it's a wonderful mix, and I'm sure that our first CPRIT person was very instrumental in helping recruit another person in this area. So if you had any doubts about the recruitment program being successful and really working, this is a really interesting and stellar panel of people. The next candidate is Marilise Kanachi-Sorrell for UT Southwest, and she also has done, her letters of recommendation were just absolutely astonishing. She works in the field of MYC oncogenes, which have been around for a really long time, and she discovered something new about this that has opened up a whole nother new field of investigation, and she did it on her own. She has 6 of the most highly cited papers in this area, and she did all of this as an undergraduate and graduate student. I think she was the one who trained in Uppsala, Sweden for a number of years, and she is being recruited from, she's not from Harvard, where's she from? Cornell. I think she's at Cornell University. Anyway, she has, that's not right, I'll have to look that up. She has offers from 6 different institutions pending, and so one of her letters, the nominating letter, said that her choice would be strongly influenced by a CPRIT award, and they thought that this might be very helpful in their being able to capture her at UT Southwest. Thank you. She's at the Fred Hutchinson in Seattle. The last one, Natalia Kirienko, is being recruited by Rice University. They put out an invitation to apply for positions that they are in an area that they have a strategic initiative in structural biology. And they had 500 applicants, and they are going out of that 500, trying to hire 3 of them, and she is one of those. And she is, again, apparently very, very highly regarded. These are all absolutely stellar candidates, just really sterling candidates that we have here. We would be lucky to get any or all of them. And so she is looking at ways in which cancer cells escape destruction by drugs, chemicals, radiation, or whatever. And so she's working on a process called mitophagy, which is the internal destruction of mitochondria in cells. And so she's trying to, she wants eventually to do a translational application where she can turn mitophagy from a process that protects the cancer cells against destruction to one that is actually cytotoxic for cancer cells. So she works in I think it's a C. elegans system, and she is going to translate that to mammalian cells, which is she intends to try at least, which would be a huge feat if she can actually do that. And the consensus of the review committee was that if anybody can do this, it would be this lady. So that's our slate for today, and I think they are all absolutely fantastic candidates. Next, we have recruitment applications that are coming in. Again, we have a deadline today for recruitment applications. 7 of them have already been submitted. 11 more are in the works and probably will be submitted before the end of the day. The total amount for that is $36 million. And so this is going to obviously, even if only half of those make it through the Scientific Review Council, we will still be over the $8 million at the end of the year that Wayne talked about earlier. So we may actually have to delay some of those to a September meeting so that we would have funding in 2016 for those. But that's what we have in the works for recruitments. And are there any questions about that?
Question.
You mentioned that people dropped out, they accepted other offers. Are we losing people because it takes a long time to work through this process? Or is it just that everyone wants the same outstanding people? And so you can't always control the competition.
I think it's competition, and you asked that at the research subcommittee meeting, and we actually looked at what is the success rate of our recruiting people who are made offers, okay? And the answer is between 70 and 80%, and so it's huge. I mean, once CPRIT makes them an offer, they are very likely to accept. And the people who drop out before we make a decision, we may be losing because, they have to make a decision elsewhere first. So
for a normal university recruitment, what's the
normal university recruitment, just standard university recruitment, the success rate is about 40%.
So we clearly have an impact.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
But are you satisfied comparing the time it takes for us to review the application, make the decision, fund the grant request? Is that comparable to a normal university recruiting time period? Or are we losing out? I mean, it sounds like we're doing great on the ones, but then the other ones, the ones that drop out that everybody really likes, is there a way to?
I don't think we're losing.
Okay.
I don't think we're losing things. I mean,
Great.
The CPRIT recruitment package is really attractive, and it's larger than most universities can afford on their own. So it's what the university can put in plus what CPRIT puts in.
Got it.
And I think it's sufficiently attractive that people will hold out and wait to see whether they get a CPRIT award or not.
Great.
So, yeah,
Thank you very much.
This was a concern Mr. Holmes expressed last year, and it was part of why we were planning to have a special meeting in the spring, and why we're asking to set a special meeting in September to be a little bit more sensitive to this time frame.
I'm a little slower than Mr. Holmes. That's why it took me a year to figure it out.
Just a couple of other points. The University Advisory Committee met recently, and one of the areas of discussion was what would be their focus for this year, and I think they've gotten off with a lot of enthusiasm about trying to address how they can best publicize CPRIT's accomplishments in anticipation of the discussion of is CPRIT going to continue. And they have, I think, viewed that as probably the most important issue that they could deal with, and so they will be having another face-to-face meeting in August and trying to discuss ways of approaching that issue. So that was, I thought, very, very good news for us. And we also, we've had an appointment of a new chair for the Adolescent and Childhood Cancer Advisory Committee. Dr. Susan Blaney from Texas Children's Hospital will be the new chair of that committee, and they haven't met yet, but they will soon.
And her name will reappear later in the meeting. She is going to be on the unfortunate need to have a search committee to find Dr. Kripke's replacement. She's graciously volunteered to serve on that.
Any other questions?
Margaret, thank you for a great report. Let's move on then to Kristen Doyle, our Interim Chief Compliance Officer, to give us the compliance report.
Members, again, I'll refer you to my May 6th memo that's in your grant packets. It was available on the portal, and once the Oversight Committee meeting is done, we'll make this publicly available. I certify that the review process for the applications that are being recommended for the 5 academic research and recruitment slates complied with the statutory and administrative requirements. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions? Okay, so we'll go ahead and go through this process of multiple motions to, by slate, bring this forth. We'll note for the record that Oversight Committee members have reported conflicts of interest. Specifically, Ms. Mitchell reports conflict with applications with Baylor College of Medicine, Baylor Research Institute, Methodist Hospital Research Institute, Rice University, University of Texas at Arlington, University of Texas at Dallas, University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston, University of Texas Health Science Center at Austin, San Antonio, University of Texas MD Anderson, University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center, Texas Tech, Texas Tech University Health Science Center, Texas A&M, University of Texas A&M, University Health Science Center. So in accordance with the rules, Ms. Mitchell will be recused from discussion or action. Are there any other reported conflicts of interest? Seeing none, hearing none. We've reviewed the applications. The PIC is recommended for the academic research grants, and PIC's recommendations will be approved if we have 2/3 votes. Dr. Kripke has presented 5 academic research slates, including 2 recruitment awards. So rather than take up individually, we'll do them as a slate. And starting with the first slate, I'll entertain a motion to approve each of the PIC's recommendations for core facility support grant awards for applications submitted by Methodist Hospital Research Institute, University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston, University of Texas Health Science Center at San Antonio, University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center, University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center, Texas A&M University Medical Center, Health Science Center. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. And we'll note for the record that Ms. Mitchell abstained from voting. So the next slate will entertain a motion to approve PIC's recommendations for high-impact, high-risk awards submitted by Baylor Research Institute, Rice University, University of Texas at Arlington, University of Texas Dallas, University of Texas Health Science Center Houston, the Health Science Center, University of Texas Austin, or San Antonio, University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center, Texas Tech University, Texas Tech Health Science Center, Texas A&M, and Texas A&M University Health Science Center. And again, we need a motion, please.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And again, we'll note for the record that Ms. Mitchell abstained from voting. And the third slate is the Multi-Investigator Research Awards. And we'll entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendations for 2 Multi-Investigator Research Awards submitted by Baylor College of Medicine. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We have 2/3, and that carries. And we'll note again that Ms. Mitchell abstained from voting. So now we'll move to recruitment awards. The next slate is first-time tenure track, and we'll take a motion to approve the PIC's recommendations for recruitment awards submitted by University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center and Rice University. Is there a motion?
moved.
Thank you. Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We'll note for the record that Mrs. Mitchell abstained from voting. And the final slate is the recruitment of established investigators awards, and we'll entertain the motion for the PICS recommendations for the recruitment awards submitted by University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Institute. Is there a motion?
moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And we'll note again that Ms. Mitchell abstained from voting. And now we'll ask, having approved the PIC recommendations for the academic research and recruitment grant awards, we'll need a motion for contract delegation authority to the Chief Executive Officer and CPRIT staff to authorize the CEO to sign contracts on behalf of the Institute.
So moved.
Thank you. Second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, members.
We're going to continue on. I think we're going to try to do product development, and then we'll take a break. If that's, is that okay with the group? Okay, we'll just continue pressing. So the chair recognizes Dr. Tom Goodman. Thank you, Margaret, Dr. Kripke. And the chair recognizes Dr. Tom Goodman, Chief Product Development Officer, who will present the program update and lay out the PICS recommendations for product development grants. Good afternoon, Dr. Goodman.
Good afternoon, Chairman Rice. The product development update memo can be found at tab 5 in the notes. In the interest of time and to move ahead, I just want to highlight a few of the items that are presented there. First of all, one of the things that we are in the process of doing is visiting each and every one of the product development grant awardees. CPRIT staff is doing this not only to get a better insight into the progress that these awardees are making with regard to the funded projects, but also we're there to ensure that these are in fact Texas companies, that they are located in Texas, that they have significant presence here, employees here, and I wanted to indicate to the Oversight Committee that we are checking up on this. Our intention is to visit every awardee every year in order to keep a finger on all of this. In addition to these visits, one of the things that we're extremely pleased about is that our awardees continue to have success in the private markets raising follow-on funding from the CPRIT grants that have been given them. Two examples of that are given in the notes. Aglia Biotherapeutics, the parent company of Ares, raised $44 million in a Series B funding to support the further development of the Ares product. In late April, following that, Myrna Therapeutics, one of our earlier grant recipients, closed on a $41.8 million Series D funding to advance their microRNA pipeline. Both of these fundings by experienced venture capitalists, I think, really indicate the fact that CPRIT's grant money was well placed and, in fact, was catalytic in helping these companies raise these additional rounds that are advancing products that are going to be beneficial, we hope, to cancer patients. So we're extremely proud of that interaction. Following that, in the next two bullet points, I list some considerable detail with regard to the fiscal 2015 cycles of grant applications that are taking place. I'm not going to go through all of that. I will say only really that the three applications that are going to be talked about at this meeting represent the last of those present in the 15.1 cycle. In the 15.4 cycle, we have now had on-site meetings, and a total of three grant applications have been advanced to due diligence. That due diligence will be undertaken in the next months, and if any are successful, they will come before the Oversight Committee probably at the November meeting. Finally, not mentioned in the update memorandum, are Cycle 16.1. The RFAs will go out on the 6th of July, and cars will open for the acceptance of applications in that round on the 3rd of August. And so we're very optimistic that we're going to get some good responses there, and we'll have a continuing flow of new companies established, hopefully relocating companies coming here to Texas. Are there any questions on any of these cycles that I've mentioned and gone over briefly? If there aren't, I want to mention just two other things that are detailed in this update memo. First of all, with regard to standard revenue sharing terms. The standard revenue sharing terms, the economic conditions thereof, were discussed and approved at the Oversight Committee meeting of January 20th, 2015. These economic terms approved by this body are unchanged. They are unchanged. What we have done is we have embodied these economic terms in an actual legal document that has been reviewed both internally and by external counsel, and we're in the process of finalizing a contract. Now, the attachment A, or the Appendix A that is present in the notes represents really, I would say, the most recent version of this. However, we are still receiving comments, and we are still going to be flexible with regard to these comments with the intention of being as accommodating as we think we can be, consistent with maintaining the rights of the state of Texas and consistent with protecting the investment that the state of Texas is making. We want to be as accommodating as possible to bring in the important research projects that have been approved by the review panels and the PDRC, and that we hope to be able to fund in these organizations to move forward to cancer therapeutic processes. So this is a continuing item, and you will probably be receiving in your next meeting what we hope will be a final Appendix D or Attachment D that will be a contract attachment. The principles that I mentioned and that I want to just say out loud once here are that we feel that it's very important that CPRIT retain a right to extend licenses to the project results that are developed as a result of our funding, to education, research, and other non-commercial purposes going on here in the state of Texas. We would not want our grant monies, the Texas state grant monies, to be gone out to a private enterprise, which then would develop something and preclude further research going on that subject. So specifically within these attachments, and you can see that at a couple of different points, we retain the right to grant licenses in regard to project results. We regard that as important. The second item of importance is the right of the state to take over project results under conditions where the grant recipient has really effectively, totally abandoned its development of the project results. The state of Texas is putting very good money into the accomplishment of these projects in these for-profit companies. If the for-profit company effectively abandons the commercialization of it, and there may be a whole host of reasons why that's reasonable, there may be a whole host of reasons, including safety considerations, which really mean that this should be dropped. It's appropriate to be dropped. It's appropriate to be abandoned. But if it is abandoned, we want to make sure that the state of Texas would have the opportunity to come in to put that together and to potentially license or transfer to another entity the development of that technology for the good of cancer patients. We want to make sure that that's the case. And we want to maintain that in any legal agreement that is attached to the contract that CPRIT makes. Okay? Finally, the final thing we think is important is that in the event that a company leaves Texas, and there's a lot of reasons why they may do that, they may be bought by someone, for example, in another state or maybe another country, and then they board up their facilities in Texas, they pull up roots and they leave. Well, by gosh, if they do that, we want our grant money back. In addition to any revenue sharing that are specified in the contract, there would be a requirement for the refund of the full grant amount awarded actually to the company. So that has been maintained in the legal document, Attachment D, and I will argue strenuously that all of those things be contained in and maintained in any further modifications of this document that occur.
Could you explain how that would work if you did have a company that had been financially successful and it was a great financial benefit to the state of Texas, CPRIT, and they did get bought and moved elsewhere? We get our grant money back, but we continue to have an ongoing interest in the
Yes.
Revenues from the organization?
I believe that if the movement is within 3 years from the completion of the grant, then they are required to essentially immediately pay back the full amount of the grant award. So if they've been extended $10 or $15 million, and they move before 3 years, by God, they owe us a check for that amount. And, as you mentioned, correctly mentioned, any project results that are incorporated within or are based on or come about as a result of that funding are subject to the revenue sharing that is provided for, I think, in Part 4 of this Attachment D here. In other words, as the committee approved back on January 20th, they will pay us back at a sliding percentage rate a total of 4 times the amount of the grant award, and then there is a continuing sharing of 0.5% of any revenues for the term of the exclusivity of any project results that are in the commercial market. So
just a hypothetical, if
of course,
somebody came up with a great product and they were bought out a year after we made the grant, and say we made a $15 million grant, they would have to pay us the $15 million back, and we would still have a right to 4 times our grant amount
plus
ongoing operations.
Plus the 0.5% continuing after that. Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
Okay.
Member Geisweit?
Is there some type of objective criteria to determine when an abandonment takes place? Or is that just something the courts would eventually determine?
There are essentially 2 ways in which abandonment can be decided. The company itself can announce to us by a written notification that they are seeking to abandon the development of the project results. And under that case, various sequelae occur. We are talking about a situation where we would begin at that point a discussion with the company lasting some 180 days in which we seek to develop a smooth and beneficial method for taking the project over. If there is no decision within that period, various other things can happen. That is not exactly described in Appendix A. That's the subject of ongoing discussions. A second method by which abandonment can take place is that we maintain the right to call them in breach. We maintain the right to send them a notification in writing and say, by God, you're abandoning this thing. They have some period of time in which to respond to us as to, or to cure that and say, well, wait a second, hold it, we didn't abandon this. We're now actively licensing this. We want to continue developing this, et cetera. The exception to all of this is if there is a substantial safety concern in the product being developed based on the project results. In other words, during the course of a clinical trial, it can sometimes become apparent that the drug or item being developed has a safety concern. It's dangerous to people. In the event that that is the case, all parties essentially agree that this cannot be developed. And that, I think, is quite appropriate. So there remain those 2 methodologies for moving towards abandonment. When that abandonment occurs, it is not an obligation of CPRIT to intervene. There may be reasons why we say, well, wait a second, it was good that they abandoned it. For reasons maybe some of which we can't even imagine at the present time. We have the right but not the obligation to step in. Very important, I think. Other questions?
I wondered if part of that question was kind of, is there a test? If they had 2 employees that were still here, does that mean they're still in business in Texas? And did they have to have no business in Texas, or is that different?
I think we're talking about the issue if somebody leaves Texas and the requirement to repay the grant amount.
Right.
The other issue is abandoning the product development results
Right.
or the patent. And so those are 2 different things. Now we are developing what it means to be in Texas, such that it would trigger the you've left Texas, now you need to repay us. Right now it'll be an investigation and a notice of default under the contract. And Tom, you can address the issue on abandonment of the
In general, we expect the main body of their business that is developing the project. Now, in some cases, there are larger companies, and the project that's being funded by CPRIT is a subset of that company. We expect that the majority, indeed the overwhelming majority of the people developing the project that we fund be located here in the state of Texas, including their C-level folks. We insist that they have offices here, that they have bank accounts here, that they are doing business here, that they are buying Texas, unless there are extenuating circumstances that they can demonstrate that the services are not available in Texas. We expect them to buy Texas. One of the things that we are considering and examining, of course, in the process of our visits is this being complied with? We intend to, put people on notice. The purpose of that notice, of course, is not just to pull their grants, but to help them come into compliance with regard to that. The process of moving a company is a complex one. Some of these companies have existing contracts someplace else, and the transfer of that contract can be a very difficult matter. We'll try to facilitate that. We will try to, develop groups. We're looking at incubator facilities. We're looking at laboratory facilities that we can actively recommend to grant recipients. Some of the Texas Medical Center stuff is just absolutely wonderful. We have people moving in down there. DNAtrix is a good example of that. I visited them last week, and they're doing very well. By and large, the folks that I've seen in all cases are very well disposed. They understand the notion of becoming Texas companies. They want to become Texas companies. And so we're working with them, we're monitoring them. The actual lines and guidelines of what constitutes a Texas company are not crystal clear. They're not rigidly drawn. We're looking for, a majority commitment.
If I understand this correctly, the Product Development Review Committee recommended 3 new product development grants, and the PIC turned down one of those. Is that correct? And if so, can you provide any insight as to the PIC's decision in turning down one that was recommended by the Product Development Review Committee?
You're certainly very correct, Dr. Mulrow. That's exactly the case, and we're going to be getting to that. I just wanted to get through one more point, and then we're going to go into a discussion of those applications. Are there additional questions with regard to the attachment D? If there are not, I'll make only a mention that the very last bullet point talks about some changes that were made to the goals and objectives of BetaCat Pharmaceuticals. You're free to read them. They're contained within Appendix B. In all cases, we tightened it up. The PDRC took a look at this and gave us a great big whoa, and so they wanted some tougher milestones in there, which we did put in, which the company did agree to. They are different from the ones which the Oversight Committee originally saw when they approved this, and so out of an abundance of caution, we're reprising those new goals and objectives to this group at this time. If there are questions about them, I'm going to be happy to answer them, but if there aren't, we can move right along to the applications that are currently before the Oversight Committee. Questions?
Questions, yeah. And I believe that whole discussion of that third application has been withdrawn, so let's just focus on the ones that were universally accepted by the PIC and move forward. Is that fair?
Yes, I believe it is. I will, of course, be happy to discuss anything that's in there. I would refer everyone to the beginnings of this, which are on page 113 in the grant awards booklet, and we can begin with a discussion of that. I certainly want to talk about the 2 applications that were approved by the PIC. If there are questions, of course, concerning the other one, I reproduce there the PDRC's general considerations, and I would be happy to go through those in detail if the committee so desires. The Program Integration Committee has reviewed and recommended one established company and one new company for product development grant awards. The two awards total $8.52 million, and there was an additional company product development grant that was recommended by the Product Development Review Council, but was not recommended by a majority of the Program Integration Committee. This final application is the subject of a minority report to the Oversight Committee that you have there in the booklet, and this grant would be for $5.33 million. And each of those awards are described in the memorandum here. Focusing then on the two awards that were presented or were approved by the Program Integration Committee, the first of these, beginning now on page 115, was Vermilion Incorporated. Vermilion is an established company that wants to develop a diagnostic assay that will allow the identification of women who have gynecological malignancies that need to be operated on by a gynecological oncologist surgeon. At the present time, women who present with an abdominal mass that's going to be removed surgically. There's no doubt about that. This is going to be surgically removed. There's a choice, though, as to whether the surgical removal is performed by a general surgeon or whether it is performed by a gynecological oncologist. It turns out that the results, when it is cancerous, are much superior when a gynecological oncologist is engaged in this surgical procedure and the procedures are used accordingly. And that is not always the case. In fact, the company reports that just 33% of ovarian cancer surgeries are performed by these specialists. The aim of the assay that the company is seeking to develop is to identify women who need to be referred to gynecological oncologists. It's a rather unique sort of assay. Typically, diagnostic assays rely on or seek a high degree of specificity, such that a positive result in the assay represents a very high probability of the presence of the disease. In this particular case, the emphasis is really rather more on sensitivity, the idea of catching all those who have the gynecological malignancy. And they're not terribly concerned if they have some false positives, because in those cases, women who do not have malignant tumors are simply referred to gynecological oncologists, and they receive very excellent surgery as well. And so the diagnostic here is a little bit different in its orientation than a typical diagnostic. I think it's really quite creative when you take a look at this, and certainly the Product Development Review Council was effusive in its recommendation of this as something that could very, very quickly improve the outcomes for women with ovarian cancer. And that was, of course, the basis of their recommendation. Again, the request is for $7.5 million. The tranching of this request is shown on page 116. Timelines are on 117. A sampling of the independent scientific evaluation recommendation is there. I think that the quotation there is indicative of the sorts of things that the reviewers said. In summary, the Product Development Review Council, after they looked at the independent business due diligence that was here, as well as the intellectual property due diligence that was provided, they came to the conclusion that this was something that certainly deserved a recommendation of funding. The Program Integration Committee now reviewed this application, and it recommends also that the Oversight Committee that it be approved for CPRIT funding. Are there specific questions with regard to Vermilion? If not, I'll proceed on to a brief description of Rossellini Scientific. This is the second company that was approved by the Program Integration Committee for funding. Surgical resection and radiotherapy are frequently used in the treatment of prostate, cervical, and rectal cancers. Unfortunately, these life-saving therapeutics can also burden cancer survivors with conditions of bladder control, overactive bladder, an embarrassing side effect that people really dislike, and in some cases even represents a a negative, dissuading them from taking necessary surgical precautions. What Rossellini Scientific is seeking to do is to use a non-invasive implantable neurostimulation device in order to restore bladder function and improve quality of life for patients suffering from overactive bladder as a result of their cancer therapy. This is a wireless stimulation system. It really combines the latest in implantable technology and wireless technology, and in fact targets a unique group of nerves that are not previously being looked at. The request from Rossellini Scientific is modest. It is $967,000. Over the period of 3 years, it's going to be matched by about $483,000. Total project cost will be $1.45 million. Again, as is always the case here in CPRIT product development grants, we are funding a project, and that project's funding is tranched according to the details that are contained at the top of page 119. The Gantt chart that they provided, which literally considers only 2 tranches, we've broken that now into 3, is in the middle of that page. And a sampling of the scientific review evaluation is contained there at the bottom. The reviewers and the PDRC felt that this had a great potential to really improve the quality of life for patients with cancer and provide supportive care. The non-invasive neurostimulation is something that is going to be really the future, I think, of neurostimulation, and this company stands, I think, at the forefront. The Product Development Review Council, finally, upon a review of the independent business evaluation of this company's project, and also the intellectual property due diligence that was performed, they recommended to the Program Integration Committee that this application be funded. The Program Integration Committee now has reviewed it, and it also recommends to the Oversight Committee that it be approved for CPRIT funding. These then are the 2 applications that are before you for approval based on the recommendation of the PIC.
Thank you. Questions, comments? So let's, at this time, go ahead and proceed with the certification by our compliance officer.
And again, members, my memo regarding certification is included in your packet and will be posted publicly. I certify that the review process for the 2 applications recommended for the product development awards complied with the applicable statutory and administrative rule requirements. And Dr. Rice made mention of this in the beginning with the prevention awards, but of course you have the compliance pedigrees for all of the applications that are being recommended in your packets. We'll make those available, as well as the third-party observer reports and other information that I relied upon in assessing the compliance for each of the applications.
Thank you. Any questions? So just for clarity, we're going to go ahead and go through the process. There is as has been earlier today, a conflict of interest issue that will separate out the slates, and we'll have a couple of motions. And just for clarity, there was one other company that had come through the PIC, and the vote had been 4-1 not to approve. So a third company that's in the book was not brought forth as the other 2, which were unanimously supported by the PIC. So I guess what I'm trying to say is there was a consideration of wanting to bring forth that as kind of the minority view and all that. That has since been dropped, the interest to do that. So we only have 2 companies that have come forth. They were unanimously supported by the PIC. This third company, which was 4-1 not supported, and that minority interest to maybe bring that to us is evaporated. So I don't really have much interest to spend time or money or discussion, I guess, on that if that's, unless the board wants to know more about it. But essentially, there's no support at the PIC now to move that one forward.
It's been withdrawn.
It's been withdrawn. Thank you. That's the right word, I guess. Any other detail on that you'd like? Okay. So let's proceed. So the Program Integration Committee has recommended one new company and one established company for Product Development Research Awards, and we'll take them up singularly because of the issues of conflicts of interest. And there's one application that's been recommended for by the Review Council that was potentially a minority kind of recommendation, but that was withdrawn, so we'll move past that. So we'll note for the record the Oversight Committee's reported conflicts of interest with some of the applications. Specifically, Mrs. Mitchell reports potential conflict of interest with the application submitted by Vermillion. So in accordance with our rules, she'll be recused from discussion or action. Are there any other conflict of interest declarations that we need for product development at this time? Seeing none, so we'll proceed to entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendation for the established company Product Development Research Award in the amount described and recommended from the PIC. Is there a motion?
moved.
Thank you. Second? Any, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And we'll note for the record that Ms. Mitchell abstained from voting, and we'll proceed now to entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendation for the new Company Development Award as defined and as recommended by the PIC. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks. So at this time, well, having approved the PIC recommendations for two product development companies, as we just have done, can we have a motion to delegate contract negotiation authority to the CEO and CPRIT staff and to authorize the CEO to sign the contracts on behalf of the Institute?
So
motion.
moved.
Thank you. Second? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And then lastly, Mr. Roberts has notified the board by letter provided to the Oversight Committee on 15 May that he seeks authority to disperse grants disperse grant funds in advance to the companies we've just approved. And so are there any questions to Mr. Roberts regarding this request? We've done this before. Companies occasionally want to have, again, an advance in the dollars before they actually start meeting milestones for kind of funding. Questions of Mr. Roberts? Okay, so pursuant to General Appropriations Act, Article 9, Section 4.03A, we'd like a motion to authorize CPRIT to disperse grant funds via advance payments to these two product development research awards that we just approved. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Second? Second. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So at this time, we'll just recess for about 5 or 10 minutes to gather some sandwiches, and maybe we'll try to come back and eat while we work, and we can continue progress here. So it's 12:42 or so. We'll pause for a moment and take a break. We're going to come back together, and you'll forgive the Oversight Committee for having a little bit of lunch while we work. And the chair recognizes Ms. McConnell to give the update on the fiscal year 2016 bond issuance resolution.
Good afternoon, members. So under tab 6, we have our request for financing resolution to the Texas Public Finance Authority to issue debt on behalf of CPRIT in FY 2016. The amount to be financed is $300 million in bond proceeds appropriated to CPRIT for both its operations and the Prevention and Research Grant Awards. The estimate that's included in here as part of the package that would go forward to TPFA is an estimate that TPFA would issue $277.3 million on behalf of CPRIT. And this would cover both current operations during FY16 as well as reimbursements for grants that were authorized in prior fiscal years from 2011 through 2015. To date, CPRIT has issued $169.6 million in commercial paper notes for fiscal year 2015. That's just for this fiscal year, for agency operations and to pay expenses for grant awards. In addition, TPFA has fixed out about $516.1 million in long-term general obligation bonds for debt that CPRIT incurred from fiscal year 2010 through 2014. And these bonds will actually yield $525.6 million in proceeds to cover those obligations. Are there any questions about the bond resolution?
See none, thank you. So this went to the Audit Subcommittee, and let's recognize where it was discussed, and Mr. Angelou is going to give us a recommendation.
Mr. Chairman, the Audit Subcommittee met on May 11th to consider the staff's recommendation to approve a resolution for a request for financing to the Texas Public Finance Authority for $300 million in debt on CPRIT's behalf for fiscal year 2016. We agree with the recommendation and recommend to the Oversight Committee to approve the resolution of funding as requested.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Angelou or the Audit Subcommittee or Ms. McConnell? Seeing none, we'll look for a motion to approve CPRIT's resolution authorizing a request for financing and provide it to the Texas Public Finance Authority. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We're going to continue on with Ms. McConnell and talk about the, this is tab 7, the 12-month renewal option for SRA International.
Yes. So CPRIT staff are bringing forward a recommendation that the agency move forward with renewing the 12-month contract, or renewing for 12 months the contract with SRA International for the pre- and post-award grants management support services that they are currently providing to us. The estimated cost for this contract for FY 2016 is $9.7 million. This is a time and materials contract, so that is a not-to-exceed amount, and we only pay for what we actually use in terms of services. By way of background, this was issued under a TexMass award, a Texas Multiple Award Schedule, and we issued a request for quote using that contract, state contract, during the summer of 2014, and made the award to them for fiscal year 2015 initially, and have this one renewal option that we had included in that statement of work. I also want to note that we issued that request for quote and follow those procedures, and are currently following procedures that are allowed by state law. There is currently legislation that is moving through the state legislature that would actually change the way that these contracts can be let, and would limit the use of the TexMass contracts to $1 million or less. But we are proceeding forward using current law. I just wanted to note that for the record. These services are essential to CPRIT's operations. In making our awards, we actually could not function in the next fiscal year without these support services from SRA International. I also want to note, as part of the recommendation, that when we had brought this forward in February to kind of move forward with that, getting pricing for the request for quote for FY16, we polled the Oversight Committee, and there were no conflicts with SRA International. And so I would just like to make sure that there aren't any conflicts of interest with that vendor at this time either.
Any conflicts, members? Thank you.
So that's all, unless there are any questions.
Thank you. This went to the, as before, to the Audit Subcommittee. Mr. Angelou, do you want to bring the report forward?
Excuse me, Dr. Rice. I would like to make a comment, add something to what Heidi said. This is going to require LBB approval under current law, under current appropriations law, because we have to get their approval for all contracts in excess of $100,000. We will be pointing out in that request that this was all done under the law in effect at the time we did this, and basically saying that this is our interpretation, and if they, the LBB, disagree, obviously let us know, but we're going to make this as transparent as possible because frankly it is ambiguous to us right now what applies at what point in time. And that said, this means that based on an extreme interpretation and the length of time it takes the LBB to staff up, presuming this law goes through the way it looks like it's going to go through, we may go through an extended period of time this fiscal year without these services, which will shut us down programmatically. And we will do everything in our power to make that clear, and I think we will be able to make them understand, but they will have their processes that they have to go through just as we have ours, and they are not going to be able to circumvent their processes to help us out. We won't be the only agency in this, but we're the only agency I care about. So I just want to point that out.
Just for clarity, is this a contract that you said begins for services they would render in our Texas fiscal year 16?
1st.
September 1st?
Correct.
So your worry is that if we haven't had LBB approval before September 1st, that we would not be able to incur?
Well, there's that. It's their interpretation.
Is that what you're
saying? They could also interpret this as well, they could say that our interpretation that we can make this request based upon the law in effect today, but the way the law, the proposed bill is it could trap us on when it's effective. It was going to be effective on September 1st. Am I saying this correctly? I mean, we're going to, if they approved the contract next week after we submit this, we'll sign the contract, but it may be that it's interpreted that the effective date is September the 1st, and they may slow it down. I don't know.
You say it would shut us down programmatically for review and approval of new grants, correct? I mean, would we be stuck with obligation?
Compliance of existing awards.
Dr. Kripke's nodding back there like.
Review of progress reports.
So we would not be able to continue funding grants we've already committed to? Or does this just stop the beginning of the process?
We could continue funding them. The issue will be, too, that we use SRA's proprietary system for our grants management and, receiving reports. That is also part of this contract, is to maintain that system and access to that system.
And are you saying, for instance, reports help us give visibility to know that milestones are met, so therefore applicant or grant awardees can be funded based on their accomplishment of milestones, and the reports are the basis for that? So that's how the whole thing comes to a stop?
Let's be clear. I mean, Dr. Kripke mentioned one aspect of compliance, which is the annual progress report, but we use this electronic grant management system for all of the required reports that we receive. They are all submitted through the electronic grants management system. That's about between 6,000 and 7,000 reports each year, and then our system can help tell us which reports are missing or late. So that's, it's a massive contract. That's the size of it, and so not having that in place will affect our ability to award, the application process, but then also the review process. the compliance review process for all of our existing grants.
That system is managed and run by SRA.
It's through their proprietary system, CGMS.
So it sounds like it's basically going to shut us down. Is that right?
It could.
We would have to put a lot of workarounds. We're not going to say, we don't have a compliance, we don't have a grants management system, so, we're not going to do anything, but it will require a whole lot of work.
And we've clearly not thought everything through. We've got good communications with all of the individuals and offices involved. But my point is as I understand it, and it's actually a couple of pieces of legislation that go together, the Legislative Budget Board staff is going to be significantly increased to accommodate this requirement, and they're not going to get their appropriations until September the 1st, and it's going to conceivably take them a couple of months to staff up, and they may ask us, and us being state agencies as a whole, to wait. I don't know. But I kind of have to look at a worst case scenario, and I'm sure it won't come to that. But.
And just for my understanding, a proposal is before the LBB currently to address this issue. I mean, that's a contract for them to sign, or where are we with that? And is there?
No, we based on your action today, will submit the request to the LBB.
I see.
And we may actually, this is ambiguous too, we may actually wait until they pass the General Appropriations Act, because that's another complicating factor. These funds are going to be governed by the new appropriations bill, but I think we can wordsmith it. We may say contingent upon passage of House Bill 1, but we'll work on that. I mean, our application isn't going to be, the time of our application isn't going to be the issue.
Other questions? So Mr. Angelou is going to bring forth the audit subcommittee comments.
Mr. Chairman, in its May 11th meeting, the audit subcommittee met and discussed the staff recommendation to renew the SRA contract. So the audit subcommittee recommends that the Oversight Committee authorize the agency to move forward to renew the contract with SRA International to provide grant management services for fiscal year 2016.
Thank you. Other questions? I was going to throw one out there at you. You know, I don't know the bill number, but the governor had obviously something about contracting come through and ask. There's a bill coming through. I think, but maybe it's Senator Nelson's bill. But he asked that the state agencies adhere to the principles that are in there prior to its passage, and I think we've all tried to do that, or you've tried to do that. I don't know if that bill's passed or if he signed it yet, but the question is does that bill have a context around this discussion?
Yes, yeah. I mean, that is going to be the governing statute for us. Yes, you're absolutely correct. The governor instructed us to comply with the intent of the legislation as it was introduced, and we have been doing that. And we'll continue to do that. It's Senate Bill 20 that just left the House yesterday, and they made a couple of tweaks to it, and it's going back over to the Senate. I do not know if the Senate will concur or try and make additional changes, which would put it into a very fast budget conference, but I am confident this bill is going to pass.
The reason I ask is that you were careful to say we're trying to construct our request based on current law, and I was kind of thinking you might mean something different than what is getting ready to be passed there, and if there's a gap there that we should be aware of. Is it?
What I'm referring to is this contract was originally issued under Tex-Mass, and the laws that were in effect at that time, the original contract on this, and this renewal is based upon that. But during the process of approval, this bill quite likely is going to have immediate effect.
No, it's September 1st.
Does it say September? Okay, you're right. That would make sense. But nonetheless, there's enough moving parts here that I can't state with certainty how they're all going to come together and at what point in time. I know how they're going to come together, but it's at what point.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? So the work at hand is to have a motion to approve a contract renewal for SRA for fiscal year 2016. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Second? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So, thank you, Ms. McConnell. We're going to proceed on to final order approving amendments to our rules, I believe, and Kristen Doyle is going to talk to us at this time. Agenda item 11, tab 8, for the final orders approving changes to CPRIT's administrative rules.
Members, we have action items related to CPRIT's administrative rules for both agenda item 11 and agenda item 12, so it's behind tab 8 and tab 9 in your book. Take up first agenda item 11. This is the final order. You may recall at the February meeting, you approved the publication of a proposed rule change for matching funds. It provided some additional clarity in terms of what other funds could be counted as matching funds. We've published in the Texas Register and on our website. We received one comment. The comment was concerned that the wording would allow grantees to include kind of everything as matching funds. The example that was used in the comment was that, carpet for the libraries could be counted as matching funds. We declined to make any change based on this comment, as I've noted in the final order, and that's behind tab 8. CPRIT's Administrative Rule 70311 provides some pretty specific guidance and says that the money has to be spent on the grant project. And so things like carpeting for the library obviously would not be something that would further the grant project. We also have processes in place, both from a certification and a verification perspective, that's included in the totality of 70311, our matching funds rule, that would protect against that. So the agency declined to make the change. And if the Oversight Committee approves, then this change will become a final rule.
Questions?
Happy to answer any questions.
So again, there's a memo from the chair of the Board Governance Subcommittee under tab 8 that addresses those things that you've just heard about. Are there any questions for anybody? If not, we'll take a motion to approve the final orders adopting CPRIT's rule changes to direct staff to file the orders with Secretary of State. For the motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to tab 9. Ms. Doyle's going to continue with agenda item 12, tab 9 on CPRIT's administrative rules.
And so, members, this is a proposed rule, which means we're starting the rulemaking process. So any approval today, we will publish those in the Texas Register and on our website and seek comments. I've included, in addition to the red line changes behind tab 9, you can see the changes that are made to our existing rule that we're proposing to be published for comment. I've also included a memo to explain them. So it's the very last document behind tab 9. That's a memo dated May 13th. And it's probably easiest if you turn to page 3 of that memo. This is the deferral process. All of these rule changes would be to effectuate a deferral process. If you remember at the April 20th meeting, there was a discussion with Mr. Roberts about whether it would be possible to defer recommendations, made either by the PIC or by the Review Council. I think the issue came up when there was a concern about whether there's going to be enough grant funding. Would it be possible to defer recommendations until another meeting when you had a better idea in terms of grant funding? We did not have a process in place, so making these proposed rule changes would be establishing that process. On page 3 and 4, it sets out the steps in the deferral process. The way that the rule has been drafted, the rule changes have been drafted, either the PIC or the Oversight Committee can defer grant recommendations until a future meeting. If the PIC does it, it's by a majority vote of the PIC. the PIC would create a list. It would list the awards and the grant amounts. That would be provided to the Oversight Committee. No further action would be necessary. In other words, the Oversight Committee does not need to approve the fact that these have been deferred. They will simply come up again at a subsequent meeting. The one thing that I would like to point out, and this is true for whether it is a PIC recommendation to defer or an Oversight Committee recommendation to defer, we have a statutory requirement that awards be made in the same year as the recommendation from the peer review council. So if the PIC or the Oversight Committee decides at the May meeting to defer a recommendation and then does not take it up again at the August meeting, it would be the end of the fiscal year, September 1st and August 31st, and so that pending deferred recommendation would die and would effectively be not recommended. And so you'll see that in both the PIC process and the Oversight Committee process. So I've talked about the PIC process for deferral. It could be that the PIC recommends all of the awards to the Oversight Committee, but the Oversight Committee makes a decision on its own to defer some or all of the PIC recommendations until a future meeting. And in that case, the deferral would have to be approved by a 2/3 majority. That keeps it consistent with the statutory requirement on the votes by the Oversight Committee. Again, like I said, if the deferral, if there's no action on the deferral, it will die on August 31st. We have something in the proposed rules that if it is a pending recommendation that dies, that they may resubmit that application again without it counting against the resubmission limit. We talked a little bit about resubmission limits earlier this meeting. There's also been a discussion at the board governance subcommittee level about potentially having those pending with no action on the August 31st, having those applications bypass the regular review panel step when they go through the review process again and perhaps go straight to the review council. The subcommittee wasn't ready to make a recommendation on that yet, so you may see a proposed, further proposed rule changes at a future meeting.
So just for clarity, you said that in any year that a review council approves an application, if that application is to ever be approved, it has to be approved by the PIC and the Oversight Committee in the same calendar year, fiscal year?
Yeah, the final award decision on a grant application has to be made in the same fiscal year as the peer review council recommendation.
Okay. Comments, questions? All right, so we have the memo in the packet that talks about this under tab 9, I believe it is, and there's no other questions or comments. If not, we'll take a motion to approve these rule changes.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so we'll go on to item 13. And it seeks to discuss, this is under item tab 10, concerning upcoming election of officers and subcommittee assignments. So as we know, the rules would say that we have essentially a 2-year term limit situation, and so we want to have we need to have elections coming, and the Board Governance Subcommittee, with this memo in the packet, is recommending that the Oversight Committee approve a process for accepting nominations and recommending officer candidates. The Board Governance Subcommittee recommends that these responsibilities be given to the Nominations Subcommittee with assistance from the outgoing board chair. So proposed changes to the bylaws and Nominations Subcommittee charter are provided in the packet, and the question is if there's any questions from the board for the Board Governance Committee about this process. And maybe I'll just do it again. I think that what the Board Governance Committee has said is that the three, is it 3 or 4 members on the Nominations Committee? The Nominations
There's
Committee,
four. There's four. But you're one of them.
We'll take it to poll the group to find out who has an interest in being in the position of either the chair, the vice chair, or the secretary, and then create a slate, and then bring that to the Oversight Committee for vote in August. And I guess since I'm the outgoing and have nothing at stake here, that I'd be the one to be invited to invite you to send your expressions of interest, or I'll just do some polling to find expressions of interest as we go forward. So that's the process as I understand it, and that's kind of the rules that need to be adopted, I guess, for the nominations, or rather, the nominations subcommittee charter to do that. Questions, comments?
Yeah, just one other thought. It's probably useful if the current chair is a member of the nominations committee.
I think I am.
Let me clarify just to refresh everybody's memories who's sitting where, because kind of interesting actually. The nominations committee is chaired by Mr. Holmes. Mr. Geistwhite is on it, and presumably Mr. Geistwhite is going off the board. Dr. Rosenfeld is on it, and Dr. Rice is on it. Of course, he's the outgoing presiding officer. So the nominations committee, depending upon what we do with Mr. Margo, what you do with Mr. Margo, and I have to refresh my memory on how subcommittees get determined. But nonetheless, there's a potential vacancy here, so the nominations committee would be Holmes and Rosenfeld, with Rice providing guidance. The governance group, which is making this recommendation, is chaired by Ms. Mitchell, and Pete Guerin is on it. Mr. Geistwhite also is on it, and Mr. Holmes is also on it. So we've got some overlapping here, but the real point is with the potential vacancy of Mr. Geistwhite from this reduces the number of people that are being involved in this selection process, nomination process.
So I guess, please.
Would that also go through the nomination committee? Didn't do it that way.
That's not the way it was done.
It wasn't done that way the first time because we didn't have a nominations subcommittee at the time.
It was sort of.
Son of a gun.
Yeah, you selected him. You said who wants to be on what, and it actually broke out pretty cleanly. Then it was, I think you determined who the temporary presiding chair was by the old rule of whoever doesn't show up gets it. And that person then in almost all cases became the permanent chair.
I wasn't. I was just putting that on the table for everybody to think about.
Thank you.
But also to make a point that whoever becomes the next chair, if they're not on the nominating committee, they could be the fourth person on it, and should be.
Right. So should we go ahead and proceed with a motion to, is there any more discussion, or do we want to approve sort of a motion to, move in this direction? And again, what we'll do is before August, go through this process. Make sense? Or any other comments, thoughts? So let's take a motion to approve the process proposed by the nominations subcommittee at the behest of the governance committee as reflected in the amendments to the Oversight Committee bylaws and nominations subcommittee charter?
So moved.
That was quick. Second. Thank you. Is there, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Did we say that close enough to do what
One
we need
quick
to do?
procedural note. These are, the changes to the bylaws don't go through the same process that administrative rule changes. They're effective once you've approved them. We don't put them out for public comment because all it is internal processes.
Okay, I believe we're on the home stretch now. Chair recognizes Ms. Doyle to present the Interim Chief Compliance Officer's report.
Members, my report is behind tab 11, and it's a fairly extensive memo that goes through several different parts of the compliance program. I'll give you a very brief highlight. This memo will be made also publicly available. I discuss the status of late or missing grantee reports, talk about the work of the CPRIT staff on completing a massive 3-part reconciliation project for grantee reports. We also discuss other compliance activities. Those include the desk reviews and the site visits that are ongoing, and then also the onboarding of Cone Resnick. This is the team that will provide support to CPRIT's internal compliance staff to monitor the grantee performance and CPRIT's adherence to statutory and administrative rule requirements. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have on my report, but first I'd like to take this opportunity as the interim officer. I get to drop in on this and take over this for 4 months before I happily hand it off to Mr. Burgess. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to highlight the work that's done by CPRIT's 3 grant accountants and 4 grant compliance specialists. They make up the core of CPRIT's compliance team internally, although I will say compliance is part of every person's job at CPRIT. And so, most of the time you will not see, the 7 people who do all of the compliance work for CPRIT. You won't see them at Oversight Committee meetings, but the work that they do is crucial to your oversight responsibilities. Following the CPRIT's state audit and all of the legislative changes that were made in 2013, the amount of grantee reports increased significantly. So at any given time, CPRIT has about 500 to 600 active grants or grants that are closing up their activities, and we require that grantees report at least 12 times to us each year. So doing the math, that's about between 6,000 and 7,000 reports that we receive. And we do use an electronic grant management system that we just talked about to track those reports. They're submitted through CGMS, and CGMS can issue reports to tell us, what's missing, what hasn't been filed. But, I call it a dumb system in the sense that it can tell if something has been submitted for that slot, but it takes a person to review the information that's submitted, and that work is done by our grant accountants and our grant compliance specialists, as well as our program staff. The grant accountants are on the front lines, particularly when it comes to processing anything financial related reporting, so that's FSRs. I talked about in my report, over the past 9 months, the grant compliance and grant accountants have looked at almost 1,400 financial status reports. It's $100 million in reimbursements that we've issued over those past 9 months. The grant accountants review all that information first, and then the grant compliance specialists do a second review of that. the grant compliance specialists back up the grant accountants, but they also do the training for our grantees, telling them about the new changes and rules and requirements. They monitor the information that we get from the grants management system. We can get the numbers in that say that the reports are late, but it takes a person to go in and look and make sure, is there a technical issue associated with why we haven't received that report? We also then, it's usually the grant specialists working with the grant accountants and the program staff that will be reaching out to the grantees to say, we need to get this in. We're holding your reimbursement until we get this. Is there a reason why you haven't submitted it? Helping them through the technical processes. CPRIT's known for our incredible research projects and for, the 2 million prevention services that we've provided over the past 5 years. But the reason why we're able to do that is because, the legislature and you, our governing board, trust us that research and prevention money is being spent on research and prevention services. And, no trust means no grants, and no grants means no progress towards detecting and curing cancer. So, no one takes a job in compliance thinking they're going to help cure cancer, but if CPRIT fulfills its mission in finding cures and treatments for cancer, a great deal of thanks will be due to CPRIT's grant compliance team. So I just want to make sure that brought that to everyone's attention. It's been great working with them and seeing the work that's been done and the program that we have in place. And, we are getting a great person in Mr. Burgess, and the grant compliance contract staff that will be coming on board will really help to cement the work that's being done.
There's not a whole lot more that I can add to that other than to say that I could not be more pleased with where we are with respect to compliance right now. And this is the work of a lot of people, the ones that she mentioned. But in addition to that, there was David before her, Kristen, Heidi, Lisa Nelson, Ramona, Michael, Kathy are all involved. Compliance is very critical to this. And it is a commitment that I made to the legislature and to you. We're not completely there yet, but I think we're very close, and we're going to be handing Mr. Burgess a very fine core function, and that they can all be very proud of what they've done. I'm proud of them.
Thank you. Questions, comments? I'm reminded I'm sorry for that aggression, but isn't there a story that John Kennedy was visiting the Space Center in Houston some years ago and asked the janitor what his job was, and the janitor said, "I'm working to put a man on the moon." So I would say that those grant specialists are working on the work of cancer research, and that's the culture we want to bring to them and let them know that. So we'll move on to item 15, then tab 12. Ms. McConnell is going to give us the Chief Operating Officer's report, please.
So members behind tab 12, you have the report on the operating budget, the performance measures, and debt issuance history. So for the first 6 months of FY15, CPRIT expended about $5.2 million, mainly for our operating budget out of the $20.3 million that we have budgeted. The primary areas that we expended were for staff salaries as well as contracts, and they're primarily the contract with SRA International for all of the meeting support and, of course, the systems that they provide us, the IT systems. We did receive during that second quarter of the year about $23,905 in revenue sharing. We also have the performance measures that we reported to the Legislative Budget Board in March for the second quarter. They're the two output measures, which are reported quarterly. And we did, besides the prevention measure, which you've seen many times, we did actually report a relocation of one of our companies. So that's one out of the targeted performance of 7. I will note that this targeted performance was set 3 years ago. So it obviously will not come to fruition. The new target going into the next biennium is 2. So it has come down significantly just because of the number of companies potentially that could relocate to Texas. The last area is the commercial paper and bond issuance. And I'll note that at the end of April, we issued another $112 million in debt, or TPFA did it on our behalf, and this covered grant awards payments that we've been making. So we've been making a lot of payments the past few months. Are there any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 16. Tab 13 is the Chief Prevention and Communication Officer's report. Dr. Garcia, welcome back.
Thank you. See if I can make it through this one without choking. So you have under tab 13 just a report with activities since February, and we've been quite busy. Thanks to Jeff Hillary and Han Public Communications, we've accomplished quite a bit. You receive daily the news articles and media reports, but I just wanted to highlight a few things. We had 2 very nice articles immediately following your approval of the program priorities, with the Houston Chronicle and the Texas Tribune running stories on our new approved program priorities. We also had a very nice article in Texas Medicine Magazine about one of our CPRIT grantees who's providing colorectal cancer screening services in rural areas out of A&M, and also training family physicians to provide colorectal cancer screening. So very nice article there. And then a Texas Medical Center interview with our very own Mr. Roberts. And really a feature story on CPRIT that was very nice. So if you don't see everything, we included a few of those clips for you in this packet. We also handed out, I believe, an article that the Cancer Letter did on Margaret Kripke's resignation. It was a very nice article from the Cancer Letter, so we were glad to see something positive from the Cancer Letter. In terms of the CPRIT conference, I put in the very last page in this packet the agenda and the names of those speakers that we have confirmed to date. So we continue to make progress on that daily. We have our abstract submission system up, and we've actually gotten our first abstract in. We typically will get about 400, or have in the past. And our registration system, we just finalized that contract this week, so our registration system should be open in about a month. Other activities, I think you'll remember our CPRIT's accomplishments brochure that we created and provided last time. Well, we'll be updating that after today's meeting with today's information and releasing that again. And there's also a slide deck and a prepared speech for any of you that have any presentations that you need to give on CPRIT. Please let us know. We'll help you tailor your presentation to the audience using those materials sort of as a starting point. The PBS cancer documentary screening took place in March. I think you all heard about that. And if you weren't able to attend, We had about 150 people show up, had a very nice panel discussion that was moderated by Dr. Rice. That video is up on our website if you'd like to see at least the panel discussion. We couldn't get rights to just the PBS clip, but we do have our panel discussion up on the website. And then in sort of new activities, Jeff Hillary and I started doing some videotaping. We're doing a series of interviews with cancer patients who've been helped by CPRIT prevention programs. And what we plan to do with those is we're going to do a press release, an announcement that we have reached a milestone in prevention with 2 million services provided, and then link to these videos as a way to illustrate what some of those programs are doing. As the next step, we're going to then turn our attention to product development and do some interviews with some of our grantees in our product development portfolio.
I sent around yesterday or the day before some links to those 4 that we did with prevention a couple of weeks ago, and I hope you folks get a chance. It's on. I hope you folks get a chance to take a look at them and give us any feedback.
So that ends my report. I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. Any other questions? All right. We'll move on to see the program priorities process update from Mr. Roberts.
This will be very quick. We were actually asked to sort of start framing this discussion at today's meeting because of the length of the agenda and other items we've had going on. We really haven't been able to organize ourselves. We are meeting as a senior staff tomorrow to start this process, and I expect you to be hearing quite a bit about this in the subcommittees as we're moving forward through the summer.
Okay, thank you. And then you're on still to get for discuss historical information for requests applications.
This was put in what they thought that we were going to need it to discuss the program priorities in the event that our funding was insufficient to cover all of the grants. That problem dissipated on us, but nonetheless, the 3 programs have put this information together, and I think it's useful for you to use, particularly as we go forward with the program priorities. Thank you.
And again, this is under tab 15, and this is really interesting and good tables of sort of the history of the programs. Any questions or comments on this? So let's continue to proceed, and we'll go to the Chief Scientific Officer and Chief Compliance Officer update.
This will be brief. It'll be a little bit longer than the others, but as you know, Dr. Kripke has announced her intentions to retire at the end of this fiscal year. We have submitted a request for approval to the LBB for a contract with a national headhunter firm. I'm expecting approval of that sometime after the legislative session concludes on June 1st. The timeline I've presented presumes approval of that contract by June the 15th. Also included in your packages are the list of the individuals that I've asked to serve on the interview committee. Dr. Mulrow has consented to chair it. Dr. Rice and Ms. Mitchell from the Oversight Committee will also be on it. And I'm very excited to get Dr. Kolodner, who chairs the Academic Research Review Council, James Wilson, who's going to be representing the University Advisory Committee, but he certainly is a key player in cancer activities in the Dallas area, and then Susan Blaney, as I mentioned earlier, from Baylor College of Medicine in association with the Texas Children's Cancer and Hematology Centers are also going to be on that interview committee. I'm trying to set up an initial organizational meeting of the interview committee sometime around the middle of June. for me to give a charge to. We have prepared, and this is my fault. I meant to include the job description. I'll resend that around. Help me remember that, Mary, if you would, so that you can see the current job description. That job description quite likely will be tweaked when the headhunters actually take over the search process. And we're looking forward to getting this underway as quickly as we can. We're not looking forward to losing Dr. Kripke, but we're very optimistic that we're going to be able to find an honorable successor.
Yes, there will be no replacement, but we'll settle for what we can get.
We'll satisfy.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Mr. Roberts? So item 20 has been addressed. Item 21 is a standing item, which I don't believe we need to do. There's no subcommittee business pending. I'm going to go to item 22, which is the general consultation with general counsel, and I don't think there's anything else unless anyone else needs to consult with general counsel. We've done that once already. Future meeting dates. I think this was the time when everyone's supposed to get out their calendars, and Wayne is going to tell us, or at least have a discussion for a moment about what date we might meet in September, early September. Is that right, Mr. Roberts?
Right. I mean, actually, I'm hoping you will tell us when we're going to have our meeting in September.
We've not collaborated yet on this, but is there a first Wednesday in September that looks like a doable date, or what are thoughts here?
I would recommend that it not be the week of September 1. September 7th is Labor Day. We may need that time period structure, how we're going to be bringing forward these recruitments to you. So sometime, I think it would be best for planning purposes after July 10th or after. September 10th. Did I say July? I'm sorry. September 10th.
We have peer review the 22nd, but you probably don't need me.
Well, yeah, we'll have to work around that. Pretty quick. It would, and by that, we will just have approximately no more than 9 recruitment grants. So you folks review the recruitment grants fairly quickly, and that's the only thing we would have on the agenda. I mean, something else might come up, but nothing long. Yes. Yeah, and actually, since you mentioned that, I think that when Mr. Margot's on board, we may want to rediscuss the 10 a.m. start time anyway, because he's flying in from El Paso, and so that's just something to consider as going forward. It's your call. Staff will accommodate whatever. Yes, sir. No, I mean, we don't know the availability of this room, but I'm hoping that we will be able to get rooms back in the extension. And for this focused of a meeting, if that doesn't work, then it may be best just to have it back in our offices like we did last month. Did that work out okay for you folks? It's not a desirable location, but it does work. I'd prefer the extension. I just don't know the availability of this room. They use this room a lot. Yes, sir.
So moved.